Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. The studio lights were brighter than usual that morning, or at least that's how it felt to everyone watching. The familiar set of Live looked the same. Sleek chairs, warm colors, the comforting buzz of a show that had become part of millions of daily routines. But something in the air was different. Even before Mark Consuelos took his seat, there was a quiet tension, the kind that creeps in when a moment is about to matter more than anyone expects. Mark smiled, as he always did, that confident, charismatic smile fans had known for decades, on screen, on red carpets, and beside his wife, Ripa. But if you looked closely, there was something softer there, something heavier. His eyes lingered a second too long before meeting the camera, as if he were gathering courage. No one knew it yet, but this was the day Mark Consuelos would finally admit what he had been carrying for years. To the public, Mark Consuelos had it all: a successful career, a long-lasting marriage, and an industry infamous for breakups, 3 children, and a charm that seemed effortless. He was the picture of stability, steady, supportive, unshakable. Fans saw him as Ripa's rock, the man who balanced her energy with calm humor, who stood beside her through career changes, personal milestones, and the relentless spotlight. Interviews painted him as confident and grounded, someone who had figured life out. But the truth, as Mark would soon reveal, was far more complicated. Behind the polished image was a man who had learned early on how to hide his fears. A man who believed that strength meant silence, and a man who, for years, had convinced himself that admitting vulnerability would somehow make him less. Mark didn't grow up believing emotions were meant to be shared. Like many men of his generation, he was taught, sometimes directly, sometimes subtly, that real men pushed through. They didn't complain. They didn't slow down. They didn't admit when the weight became too much. As his career took off, those lessons followed him. Long days on set, constant pressure to stay relevant, the unspoken expectation to always show up smiling, energized, and in control. Every role demanded intensity, every public appearance demanded confidence. And then there was family life, beautiful, fulfilling, but demanding in ways that cameras never captured. Being present, being supportive, being strong, always strong for everyone else. Over time, Mark began to tuck pieces of himself away. Stress became normal, exhaustion became routine, doubt became a quiet companion he learned not to acknowledge. "I told myself this was just life," he would later admit, "that everyone felt this way, and you just handled it." It wasn't a dramatic breakdown or a public scandal that pushed Mark toward confession. It was something smaller, quieter, more human. One evening, after a long day, he found himself sitting alone in his car, engine off, hands still on the steering wheel. Minutes passed, then more. He wasn't sad in the traditional sense, but he wasn't okay either. For the first time, he allowed himself to ask a question he had avoided for years. When was the last time I checked in with myself? The answer unsettled him. He realized he had become very good at performing happiness while slowly disconnecting from his own emotions. He was present for everyone else, yet distant from himself. That night marked the beginning of something he didn't yet have words for, a reckoning. Ripa had always been perceptive. Years of marriage, partnership, and shared chaos had taught her to read Mark's silences as clearly as his words. She noticed the subtle changes first, the way he seemed distracted, the moments where his laughter didn't quite reach his eyes, the nights he stayed awake longer than usual, staring at nothing. When she finally asked him what was wrong, Mark did what he always did, deflected, joked, changed the subject. But this time, Kelly didn't let it go. "You don't have to carry everything alone," she told him quietly.
Lingered. For Mark, it felt both comforting and terrifying, because admitting he was struggling meant confronting the idea that he wasn't as invincible as everyone believed, or as he believed he needed to be. The confession didn't come all at once. It unfolded slowly, in conversations that stretched late into the night, in moments of honesty that felt unfamiliar but strangely freeing. Mark admitted how the pressure to constantly succeed had worn him down, how the fear of letting people down, his family, his fans, himself, had kept him in a constant state of tension. He talked about aging in an industry obsessed with youth, about wondering if the next role would be the last, about comparing himself to younger versions of himself and feeling like he was always chasing something he could never quite catch. Most of all, he admitted how lonely it felt to be seen as the strong one. When everyone thinks you're okay, he said, it becomes really hard to say that you're not. Even after acknowledging these feelings privately, Mark wasn't sure he could ever talk about them publicly. The idea made him uncomfortable, exposed. But something kept nudging him forward. He thought about his children, about the example he was setting, about the message silence sends, that struggling is something to be hidden, something to be ashamed of. He thought about fans who saw him as a symbol of stability and strength, not realizing that strength could look like honesty too. And he thought about himself, about the relief he felt every time he chose openness over avoidance. Eventually, the decision became clear. If he was ever going to stop hiding, it had to start now. Back on the live set, the conversation took an unexpected turn. What began as light banter shifted when Mark paused, took a breath, and spoke words no one was prepared to hear. "I want to talk about something I've never really talked about before," he said, voice steady but sincere. The studio fell quiet. Mark spoke about pressure, about pretending to be fine, about the emotional toll of always being on. He admitted that for years he had ignored signs that he needed to slow down, to reflect, to ask for help. "This isn't easy for me," he said honestly, "but I think it's important." Kelly watched him with visible emotion, pride, support, and love written across her face. In that moment, Mark Consuelos wasn't a TV host or actor. He was simply a man choosing truth over image. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Social media lit up with messages from fans who felt seen by his words. Many admitted they had always admired him, but now respected him on an entirely different level. "He finally admitted what so many of us feel," one fan wrote. Another shared, "I never thought someone like Mark Consuelos could struggle the same way I do. This meant more than he'll ever know." What shocked fans wasn't that Mark had struggles, it was that he had been brave enough to name them out loud. In the days that followed, Mark reflected on the moment that had changed the narrative, not just for fans, but for himself. He realized that vulnerability hadn't weakened him, it had expanded him. It allowed him to connect more deeply, to breathe more freely, to exist without constantly performing. Strength, he learned, wasn't about carrying everything alone. It was about knowing when to set something down. For the first time in years, Mark felt lighter, not because life had become easier, but because he was no longer hiding from it. Mark Consuelos didn't suddenly become a different person after his confession. He still worked hard, still joked, still showed up for his family and career. But something had shifted. He allowed himself rest without guilt, reflection without fear, and honesty without apology. And in doing so, he gave fans something far more valuable than perfection. He gave them permission. Permission to speak, to struggle, to admit that being human is messy, complicated, and still worthy of love. Years from now, fans may not remember the exact words Mark used that day, but they will remember how it made them feel. Seen, understood, less alone. Because sometimes the most shocking confession isn't about scandal or secrets, it's about finally telling the truth. And when Mark Consuelos finally admitted it, the world didn't turn away, it leaned in.